When the police showed up at my door after my best friend disappeared, I thought they were going to tell me she was dead. What they said was so much worse. I texted Brianna 3 times on Tuesday and she didn't respond. By Wednesday morning, I drove to her apartment and knocked on the door. Her landlord answered. "Can I help you?" I explained I was looking for Brianna. She moved out yesterday, took everything, and left. I tried calling her phone and it went straight to voicemail. I went home completely confused because we just made plans to go hiking that weekend. On Thursday morning, there was a knock on my door. 2 detectives stood on my porch. "We need to ask you some questions about a recent death." My heart dropped. I thought they were going to tell me Brianna was dead. Instead, one of them pulled out a photo of a man I'd never seen before. "Do you know this person?" I shook my head. I've never seen him before in my life. They looked at each other. "Can we come inside?" We sat in my living room and one of the detectives leaned forward. "This man was found deceased in his apartment 2 days ago. We found your fingerprints on a kitchen knife at the scene. Your hair was found on his couch. Your gym membership card was in his bedroom." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "That's impossible. I don't know him. I've never been to his apartment." They asked me where I was Monday night. I told them I was home alone watching TV and had no way to prove it. They asked if anyone had access to my belongings. I mentioned Brianna and explained she'd been missing since Tuesday. "What's her full name?" I gave them her information and they wrote it down. They told me not to leave town and left. I immediately tried to call Brianna again, but her phone was still off. I drove to the office building where she worked as an accountant. I went to the reception desk. "I'm looking for Brianna Hayes." The receptionist looked confused. "We don't have anyone by that name working here." I insisted I'd picked her up from this building before. She checked her system again. "I'm sorry. There's no one by that name in our directory." I sat in my car trying to understand what was happening. That night, I went through my apartment looking for things that might be missing. My spare house key was gone from the drawer where I kept it. A coffee mug I never used was missing from the back of my cabinet. The scarf I'd worn to a wedding last year wasn't in my closet. The next morning, the detectives came back. "We have more evidence we'd like to discuss." They showed me photos from the crime scene. My scarf was draped over the couch. The missing coffee mug was in the sink with my lipstick on the rim. A receipt with my signature was found in the trash. "I didn't put any of those things there," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone is setting me up." They asked about Brianna again, and I gave them her phone number and address. They came back an hour later. "The phone number is disconnected. The address you gave us is an empty apartment." We ran the name Brianna Hayes and found nothing. No driver's license, no social security number, no employment history. "Are you sure that's her real name?" I pulled up photos of us together on my phone and showed them. They took my phone to send the photos to themselves. "We're going to need you to come down to the station for further questioning." I called a lawyer immediately. Over the next 2 days, I discovered everything. Brianna's job didn't exist. The graduate school she said she attended had no record of her. Her sister I'd met once was actually an actress she'd paid. The coffee shop where we first met had security footage of her following me there. She hadn't randomly sat next to me. She'd been watching me and planned the whole thing. My lawyer got access to Brianna's apartment before she left and found a box hidden in the closet. Inside were copies of my house key, strands of my hair in a plastic bag, one of my old credit cards I thought I'd lost, and a notebook. I sat in the police station reading the notebook while my lawyer and the detectives watched. It was full of notes about me, my daily routine, where I kept my spare key, my fingerprint on a glass she'd saved from my apartment, plans for how to transfer my DNA to the crime scene, the victim's name with notes like ex-boyfriend, restraining order, perfect target. The last entry was dated a week ago. "Everything is in place. She will take the fall. New identity ready. Leaving Tuesday." I closed the notebook and looked up at the detectives. Her real name isn't Brianna Hayes. She spent an entire year pretending to be my friend, so she could frame me for killing her ex-boyfriend. One of the detectives took the notebook from me and started flipping through it. The other one was looking at the items from the box. My lawyer put his hand on my shoulder. I sat there watching the detectives' faces trying to figure out if they believed me, or if I was about to be arrested for a crime I didn't commit. William set the notebook down on the metal table between us and leaned back in his chair. He asked if I had anything else to tell them about Brianna or the victim. I shook my head and felt the weight of the notebook in my hands, even though he'd taken it from me. My entire friendship had been fake. Every coffee we'd shared, every movie night, every conversation about our lives had been her collecting information to destroy me. Cassandra put her hand on my arm and told the detectives she needed time alone with her client. Williams and Rodriguez stood up and walked out of the interrogation room. The door clicked shut behind them. Cassandra turned to face me with a serious look. She explained that the notebook helped our case, but physical evidence at a crime scene carried massive weight with juries. My fingerprints on that knife, my hair on the couch, my belongings scattered through his apartment painted a picture that would be hard to overcome. We needed more than just the notebook to prove the frame-up. We needed to find Brianna herself. The detectives came back in after 15 minutes. Rodriguez pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. She'd been quiet during most of the earlier questioning, but now she started asking detailed questions. She wanted to know exactly how Brianna had collected my DNA and personal items. I walked her through everything I could remember. Brianna had insisted on washing glasses after I'd used them at her apartment, saying she was particular about her dishwasher. She'd borrowed my scarf one cold day in January, claiming she'd forgotten hers at home. Items had gone missing over months, small things I'd barely noticed at the time. A coffee mug from the back of my cabinet, My spare house key that I thought I'd misplaced. An old credit card I assumed I'd thrown away. Rodriguez wrote down every detail while Williams watched me carefully. They spent another hour going through my statement before Williams told me they were taking the notebook and evidence box as official evidence. He had copies made of everything first, and handed me a manila envelope with duplicates of all the photos and pages. Williams admitted this was the most elaborate frame-up attempt he'd seen in 20 years on the force. But he warned me that didn't guarantee the district attorney would believe it. Without finding Brianna herself, without proving she actually existed and did these things, the physical evidence against me was still powerful. They told me I could go, but to stay available for more questions. Cassandra drove me to Katie's apartment because I couldn't face going back to my own place. Every corner of my home held memories of Brianna's lies. The couch where we'd watched movies, the kitchen table where we'd eaten takeout, the spare bedroom where she'd slept over dozens of times, probably going through my things while I was asleep. Katie opened the door and took one look at my face. She pulled me into a hug without saying anything. That's when I finally broke down crying for the first time since this nightmare started. I'd been holding everything together, trying to stay calm and logical for the police and my lawyer, but standing in Katie's doorway, with a real friend's arms around me, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Over the next 2 days, Cassandra hired a private investigator named Justin. She explained he specialized in tracking people using false identities. Justin arrived at her office on Saturday morning with a laptop bag and a serious expression. He was maybe 40 with gray starting at his temples, and the kind of focused energy that made me think he was good at his job. Cassandra had already sent him the photos I had of Brianna. He opened his laptop on her conference table and immediately started running the images through facial recognition databases. He explained the process while he worked. Most people left digital footprints somewhere even when they tried to stay hidden. Social media, security cameras, driver's license photos, passport records. The key was finding the right database and having the access to search it. Justin told me that whoever Brianna really was, she was skilled at staying off the grid. But everyone made mistakes eventually. He was focusing on the paid actress who pretended to be her sister. That was a thread we could pull to unravel her real identity. The actress had to have some connection to Brianna. A talent agency, a payment record, some way they'd found each other. Justin had contacts in the entertainment industry and was already working on tracking her down through casting databases. Detective Rodriguez called me on Monday afternoon. She'd obtained security footage from my apartment building going back 6 months. The footage showed Brianna leaving my apartment late at night on multiple occasions, always carrying a bag. She'd return hours later without it. The timestamps matched up perfectly with when she must have been visiting the victim's apartment to plant my belongings and DNA evidence. Rodriguez explained they were building a timeline of exactly when each piece of evidence appeared at the crime scene. The victim's neighbor had reported seeing a blonde woman matching Brianna's fake appearance entering his apartment 3 times in the weeks before his death. The forensic team was examining everything now. A man named Neil headed up the analysis of how my fingerprints got on the murder weapon. Rodriguez explained that Neil had 20 years of experience with fingerprint evidence. He was looking at the pattern of the prints, the pressure points, the angle. He called her back that same day with his findings. The print pattern on the knife suggested it had been pressed into my hand while I was unconscious or sleeping. The pressure was wrong for someone actually gripping a knife to use it as a weapon. The angle showed the knife had been held against my palm and fingers, rather than grasped naturally. Neil was prepared to testify that the prints were planted, not created through normal use. Cassandra filed a motion that afternoon to prevent my arrest while the investigation continued. She argued I was cooperating fully with the police. The evidence of the frame-up created reasonable doubt about my involvement. The judge held a hearing the next morning. I sat in the courtroom wearing the same clothes I'd worn for 3 days because I still couldn't go home. The prosecutor argued I was a flight risk given the severity of the charges. Cassandra countered with the notebook evidence and Neil's fingerprint analysis. The judge looked through the copies of Brianna's notebook for 10 minutes while everyone waited. Finally, he ruled that I couldn't be arrested yet, but I had to surrender my passport. They fitted me with an ankle monitor right there in the courthouse. A technician strapped the black plastic device around my left ankle and explained the boundaries I couldn't cross. I was confined to a 10-mile radius around Katie's apartment. At least I wasn't in jail, but I also wasn't free. Justin called me the next afternoon while I was sitting in Katie's living room staring at the ankle monitor around my leg. He said he found the actress through a talent agency database and was on his way to talk to her. I asked if I could come, but he said it would be better if he went alone since she might get scared with too many people showing up. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. Justin explained that the actress nearly slammed the door in his face when he mentioned Brianna, but she agreed to talk when he told her about the murder charge and that an innocent person might go to prison. She kept saying she didn't know anything about a murder. She thought it was just for a prank video. Someone had contacted her through her agency 6 months ago asking her to play a sister role for what they described as a reality show surprise. The woman paid her $5,000 in cash, half up front and half after the single meeting with me at that coffee shop. The actress said she felt sick when Justin explained what Brianna had really been planning. She agreed to come to the police station the next morning to give a full statement. I sat in a conference room at the police station with Detective Williams, while the actress talked to a sketch artist in another room. Katie was with me because I couldn't handle being there alone. The actress had already given her statement to Rodriguez about the cash payment and the fake sister act. Now she was describing what the woman who hired her actually looked like. Williams explained that Brianna must have been wearing the blonde wig and colored contacts when she was around me, but she would have used her real appearance when meeting the actress to avoid creating a trail that led back to her fake identity. After an hour, the sketch artist came in carrying a drawing. Williams took it and laid it on the table in front of me. I stared at a face I had never seen before. The woman in the sketch had dark hair cut short, glasses with thick frames and harder features than the soft, friendly face I knew as Brianna. The actress said the woman spoke with a slight accent that might have been fake, something vaguely European that came and went. I kept looking at the sketch trying to find anything familiar in those eyes or that mouth, but there was nothing. This was who Brianna really was. The person I called my best friend for an entire year, who I told my secrets to and made plans with and trusted completely, had been a total lie from her appearance to her personality to the way she talked. Every smile, every laugh, every moment of our friendship had been an act performed by someone wearing a disguise. The forensic accountant who traced Brianna's money called Detective Rodriguez 3 days later with new information. I was back at Katie's apartment when Rodriguez phoned to tell me what they found. The $5,000 paid to the actress came from prepaid debit cards, not cash like the actress thought. The woman who hired her had handed over what looked like cash, but the bank determined it was actually withdrawn from a series of cards purchased at different stores across 3 states over a period of 2 months. Someone had been planning this for way longer than a year. They tracked the card purchases to locations in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Each card was bought with cash at a different store, never more than $500 at a time to avoid triggering any reporting requirements. The accountant estimated that Brianna had been moving money and preparing her frame-up plan for at least 18 months, maybe longer. She had serious resources and knew exactly how to avoid leaving a trail. Rodriguez said they were looking into where that much money could have come from, but so far, they had nothing. Katie took a leave from her job at the marketing firm where she worked to stay with me full-time. I was scared to be alone even during the day. Every sound made me jump. I checked the door locks 5 or 6 times before going to bed. I kept thinking Brianna might come back to finish what she started, or that I missed something and the police would decide to arrest me anyway. Katie never complained about putting her life on hold. She made meals, answered my phone when reporters called, and sat with me when I woke up from nightmares about being in prison. One night I apologized for being such a mess, and she looked at me seriously. She said this is what actual friends do for each other. They show up when things are terrible and they stay. I realized she was showing me what real friendship looked like after a year of experiencing a fake version. Brianna had taught me to question everyone's motives, but Katie was proving that genuine people existed. Neil called Detective Williams with new findings from my apartment. His team had gone back to do another search after the sketch revealed Brianna's real appearance. They found tiny fibers embedded in my bedroom carpet that matched the victim's apartment carpet. The fibers were concentrated near my dresser where I kept some of my clothes and jewelry. Neil explained that Brianna must have walked through the crime scene after killing him, then come straight to my apartment to plant more evidence. The fibers were on her shoes and transferred to my carpet when she went into my bedroom. This meant she had been in my room after committing murder, going through my things while I was probably asleep in the next room or out somewhere. The thought made my skin crawl. She had walked around my apartment with a dead man's blood possibly still on her, touching my belongings and planning how to destroy my life. Neil said the fiber evidence was another piece proving the frame up, because it showed the connection between both locations through Brianna's movements. Justin found more details about the apartment Brianna rented under her fake name. The landlord told him the whole thing was handled remotely. Someone calling herself Brianna Hayes contacted him through email about the apartment 6 months before she moved in. She paid for 6 months' rent up front with a cashier's check mailed from a post office 2 states away. The landlord never met her face to face. He left the key in a lockbox with a code, and she moved in without ever having a conversation with him beyond emails. The utilities were set up through online accounts with prepaid credit cards. Even the furniture in the apartment was delivered by stores and assembly services that never saw her. Justin said it was another layer of planning that showed how careful Brianna was about not leaving traces. She created an entire fake life that existed only on paper and in digital records. The landlord felt terrible when Justin explained what happened. He said he never would have rented to someone he didn't meet in person if he had known, but the 6 months paid up front was too good to pass up. 2 weeks after the police first came to my door, Detective Rodriguez asked me to come to the station again. She said 2 other women had come forward after seeing news coverage about my case. Both of them had similar stories about being befriended by someone who later disappeared. Rodriguez showed me their statements. The first woman said a friend she met at a yoga class 3 years ago had slowly borrowed items over several months, including a house key she claimed to need for dog sitting. The friend vanished suddenly, and the woman later discovered her spare credit card was missing, along with strands of her hair from a brush she kept in her bathroom. The second woman described meeting someone at a professional networking event who built a friendship over 8 months, then disappeared after gaining access to her apartment and personal information. She reported several items missing, including jewelry and her passport. Both women said the friend seemed interested in their daily schedules and asked detailed questions about their routines. Reading their statements felt like looking at an early draft of what Brianna did to me. Detective Williams called a meeting with me, Cassandra, and Justin to discuss the pattern emerging from the other victims. He said it was clear Brianna had done this before, possibly many times over several years. The 2 women who came forward might be only the ones who recognized the pattern from news coverage. that there could be more victims who never realized they were targeted. Williams contacted the FBI because the evidence showed Brianna crossing state lines and potentially committing identity fraud and theft on a federal level. An FBI agent named Gerard, who handled serial identity fraud cases, agreed to look at the evidence. Williams said if Gerard took the case, it would bring more resources to finding Brianna and might connect her to other crimes across the country. The meeting ended with everyone agreeing that I probably was not Brianna's first attempt at framing someone for a serious crime. I might just be the first time she escalated to murder. Gerard arrived at the police station 2 days later carrying 3 file boxes. Detective Williams introduced us in a conference room where Gerard spread out papers and photos across the table. He explained these were 3 unsolved cases from different states where women reported being befriended by someone under false pretenses who later disappeared. In each case, the friend had collected personal items, gained access to apartments, and learned detailed information about the victim's life. None of the cases resulted in murder charges, but all of them involved the same careful planning and sudden disappearance. Gerard pointed to photos from each case showing different women who the victims had befriended. One had red hair, another was brunette, the third was blonde like the Brianna I knew. But Gerard said the methodology was identical in every case. The gradual friendship building, the careful collection of DNA and personal effects, the fake identity that vanished without a trace. He believed all these cases were the same person using different appearances. In each case, the friend disappeared suddenly, and the victim reported theft of personal items and strange things happening after the disappearance. One woman found her apartment key missing. Another discovered someone had been in her home while she was away. The third had items show up in places she did not put them. Gerard looked at me and said Brianna was likely a professional criminal who had been doing this for years, and the murder frame-up was her most dangerous escalation yet. I picked up the first file and started reading through the case from Michigan. A woman named Sarah reported meeting someone who called herself Jennifer at a yoga class. They became friends over 6 months. Jennifer asked detailed questions about Sarah's schedule, borrowed her apartment key to water plants when Sarah traveled, and collected small personal items Sarah thought she'd lost. One day, Jennifer disappeared completely, and Sarah discovered her credit cards were being used in another state. I moved to the second file from Oregon. A woman named Michelle met someone named Ashley at a bookstore. Same pattern over 8 months. Ashley slowly gained access to Michelle's life, learned her routines, took copies of her keys, and vanished with Michelle's identity documents and several pieces of jewelry. The third file from Texas showed a woman named Rebecca who befriended someone called Diana. 7 months of careful friendship building, constant questions about Rebecca's daily life, borrowed items never returned, sudden disappearance. Every single case followed the exact same steps Brianna used on me. The gradual trust building, the interest in schedules and routines, the access to homes and belongings, the fake identity that left no trace. Gerard watched me read and explained that the pattern was too specific to be coincidence. He believed one person was behind all these cases, using different names and appearances each time. The murder was new, though. In the previous cases, she just stole identities and belongings, but with me, she'd gone much further. He said this kind of behavior usually got worse over time, not better, and we needed to find her before she tried this again with someone else. 3 days later, Cassandra called me from the district attorney's office. She'd spent the morning presenting everything we'd found to the DA and his team. She laid out the notebook evidence, the fake identity, the pattern from other states, and Gerard's federal investigation. The DA listened, but kept pushing back. He said the physical evidence at the crime scene was strong, and juries trusted forensic evidence more than theories about elaborate frame-ups. Cassandra argued that I was clearly a victim caught in an ongoing criminal operation, not a murderer. She showed him the files from Gerard proving Brianna had done this before in multiple states. The DA asked why I didn't notice anything wrong during a whole year of friendship. Cassandra explained that's exactly how con artists work, by being patient and building real trust before betraying it. After 2 hours of back and forth, the DA finally agreed to delay any charging decision until the investigation into Brianna's real identity was finished. It wasn't the full clearance I wanted, but it bought us time to find more evidence and track Brianna down. Cassandra told me to stay available and keep helping Gerard with whatever he needed. The DA made it clear he was watching the case closely and could change his mind if the investigation stalled. Justin called that same afternoon with new information about the victim. He'd been digging through police records and found something important. 8 months before he died, the victim filed a police report about a stalker ex-girlfriend who'd been threatening him. He told police she showed up at his apartment multiple times, sent him angry messages, and said she'd make him pay for leaving her. He tried to get a restraining order but couldn't provide enough details for the court to approve it. The woman used different phone numbers, never stayed in one place long enough to be served papers, and the victim only had a vague physical description. Justin read me the description from the police report. Dark hair, around 5'6", slim build, possibly wearing colored contacts to change her eye color. It matched the sketch from the actress, not the blonde woman I'd known as Brianna. The victim had been trying to escape her for months before she apparently decided to kill him. Justin found more reports where the victim called police about suspicious activity near his apartment, cars following him, and items moved in his home when he was away. Every report was filed, but nothing came of them because there wasn't enough evidence to act on. It was submitted under the name Victoria Johns with an address that turned out to be an empty lot in another city. The victim described his relationship with Victoria as lasting 3 months before he discovered she'd lied about major parts of her life. When he tried to end things, she became threatening and obsessive. He wrote in the restraining order request that he feared for his safety and believed she was capable of violence. The judge denied the request because Victoria Johns didn't exist in any legal database, and without a real identity, they couldn't serve the order or enforce it. The victim had been trying to escape Brianna for over a year using whatever name she'd given him. He filed multiple police reports, tried to get legal protection, and even moved to a different apartment, but she kept finding him. Detective Williams said it was clear now that she'd been planning his murder for months, maybe the whole time she was targeting me. She needed someone to frame for it, so she could disappear cleanly without being connected to the crime. The victim tried everything he could to get away from her, and it wasn't enough. Gerard asked me to come back to the police station for a detailed interview. He set up a recording system in a conference room, and we sat down with coffee and my phone full of photos with Brianna. He said he needed to document everything about my friendship with her, because he believed she would try this again somewhere else if we didn't catch her. We needed a complete record of her methods to help identify future victims before she hurt anyone else. I started from the beginning, describing the coffee shop where we met. I explained how she sat next to me when other seats were available, how she commented on the book I was reading, how the conversation felt natural and easy. Gerard asked specific questions about every interaction I could remember. What did she ask about my life? How did she react when I talked about living alone? When did she first come to my apartment? How did she get my spare key? I walked through the entire year month by month while Gerard took notes and recorded everything. He asked about the victim, and I explained I'd never heard Brianna mention him. Never saw any sign she had an ex-boyfriend or past relationship. She'd told me she was focused on her career and hadn't dated anyone seriously in years. Every single thing she told me was a lie designed to make her seem trustworthy and safe. Gerard said my detailed account would become part of a federal investigation into a suspected serial criminal. My year of being manipulated was now evidence that might help catch her and protect other people. Katie came over to my apartment the next day with her laptop. She'd taken time off work to help me go through every text message, social media post, and photo I had with Brianna. We needed to create a timeline showing how calculated every step of our friendship was. Katie opened a spreadsheet and started organizing everything by date. The first text from Brianna came 2 days after we met at the coffee shop. She'd suggested meeting for coffee again, and I'd agreed immediately. Katie pointed out that Brianna always let me suggest times and places, never pushed too hard, and made everything feel like my idea. She was patient, and let me come to her instead of seeming too eager. We went through 6 months of messages, and Katie highlighted every time Brianna asked about my schedule, my work routine, or my plans. She asked these questions constantly, but in casual ways that didn't seem invasive at the time. Katie found the message where Brianna offered to water my plants when I visited my parents for a week. That's when she got my spare key. Another message showed Brianna suggesting we exchange emergency contact information in case anything happened. That's how she got my personal details. Katie created a timeline that made it obvious Brianna picked me specifically because I lived alone, worked from home 3 days a week, and had a predictable routine. I was easy to monitor, and my lifestyle made me a perfect target for framing. Everything I thought was random friendship was actually careful selection and planning. Neil called with results from his forensic analysis of the items in Brianna's hidden box. His team had been examining everything to build a timeline of when she collected each piece of evidence. The results shocked everyone. Some of the items, including strands of my hair and a copy of my fingerprint on a glass, were collected as early as 14 months ago. That was 2 months before Brianna and I supposedly met randomly at the coffee shop. Neil explained this meant she'd been watching me and collecting evidence for months before she ever introduced herself. The coffee shop meeting wasn't the beginning of her plan. It was just when she decided to make direct contact. She'd been following me, learning my habits, and taking samples of my DNA for weeks or months before I even knew she existed. Neil found microscopic evidence on some items suggesting they'd been stored carefully in plastic bags to preserve them. She'd been building her evidence collection the whole time, preparing everything she'd need to frame me long before we became friends. The timeline proved this wasn't an impulsive decision, or something that developed during our friendship. She targeted me first, planned everything out, and only then approached me to start building the trust she'd need to access my apartment and belongings. 2 days later, Justin got the break we'd been waiting for. He'd been tracing the cashier's check Brianna used to pay for her apartment 6 months in advance. The check came from a bank in Nevada, 3 states away from where we lived. Justin contacted the bank and got them to pull records on the account. It was opened 4 months before Brianna moved into her apartment here, using fake identification documents and a false social security number. The bank had security footage from when the account was opened, and Justin convinced them to send it over. The footage showed a woman matching the police sketch, with dark hair and glasses, filling out paperwork and making the initial deposit in cash. She looked nothing like the blonde Brianna I knew. Justin sent the footage to Gerard and Detective Williams immediately. This was the first clear image of what Brianna actually looked like, not the disguise she used with me. The woman in the footage looked ordinary, someone you'd pass on the street without noticing. She wore plain clothes, kept her head down, and seemed careful about where she stood in relation to the cameras. Even while opening a bank account with fake documents, she was thinking about surveillance and trying to minimize her exposure. Gerard sent the bank footage to FBI facial recognition systems the same day. The technology compared the woman's face to millions of images in law enforcement databases across the country. Within 6 hours, Gerard called with results. The system got a hit. The woman had been flagged in connection with identity theft investigations in 5 different states over the past 7 years. And each time she used a different name and slightly different appearance, but the facial recognition software matched her bone structure and features across all the cases. She'd been investigated in California, Washington, Arizona, Florida, and Texas, but never caught or positively identified. Every investigation eventually went cold because she disappeared before authorities could locate her. The pattern went back 7 years at minimum, possibly longer if there were cases that never got reported or connected. Gerard explained that she was likely a professional criminal who'd been doing this for most of her adult life. She knew how to avoid detection, how to create believable fake identities, and how to disappear when investigations got close. The murder frame-up was her most dangerous move yet, but it fit the pattern of her crimes getting more serious over time. Gerard called me in for another meeting at the police station. He'd been coordinating with FBI analysts who studied the evidence and built a profile of Brianna's behavior patterns. They'd reached a conclusion that changed how I understood everything. Gerard explained that Brianna's real target was probably the victim all along. She'd been stalking him for over a year, planning his murder, but she needed a way to do it without being connected to the crime. That's where I came in. The FBI believed she specifically looked for someone who could believably be framed for killing him. She needed a woman who lived alone, had no solid alibi for most evenings, and had a predictable routine that made her easy to monitor and manipulate. I fit those criteria perfectly. She spent 14 months collecting my DNA and belongings, a year building a fake friendship to gain my complete trust, all so she could kill her ex-boyfriend and make it look like I did it. I wasn't a random victim. I was carefully selected because my life circumstances made me the perfect scapegoat. Gerard said this realization was important, because it meant she'd put enormous time and effort into this specific plan. She wasn't impulsive or careless. Every step was calculated to let her commit murder and escape completely clean. I sat there processing what he'd told me and felt 2 completely opposite things at once. Relief that I now understood why she picked me, that it wasn't personal or something I did wrong, and horror at how coldly she evaluated my entire life and decided I was useful enough to destroy. The next morning, Rodriguez called me to come back to the station because she'd found someone who saw something the night of the murder. I drove there with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, not sure if this would help or make things worse. The witness was a woman in her 60s who lived in the apartment building where the victim died. She sat across from me in the interview room looking nervous. Rodriguez asked her to describe what she saw that Monday night. The woman explained she was coming home from her book club around 9:30 and noticed a blonde woman in the lobby. She remembered because the woman was carrying a large black duffel bag and kept looking around like she was worried someone would see her. The description matched Brianna's fake appearance perfectly, down to the long blonde hair and the oversized sunglasses she wore even though it was dark outside. The witness said the woman got on the elevator and pressed the button for the victim's floor. She didn't think much of it at the time because people visit that building all the time, but something about how nervous the woman seemed stuck in her memory. Rodriguez showed her photos of Brianna in her blonde disguise and the witness nodded immediately. That was definitely the woman she saw. I sat there listening and felt this weird mix of relief and anger. Relief because this proved I wasn't there, but anger because Brianna had been so careful, and still someone saw her and she almost got away with it anyway. Cassandra filed a motion the next day to have all potential charges against me formally dropped based on the mounting evidence. She explained the witness testimony combined with the notebook, and planted evidence made it clear I was framed. I sat in her office while she worked on the legal documents, watching her type and feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. But when she submitted everything to the district attorney's office, they came back with bad news. The DA wanted to wait until Brianna was actually caught and arrested before officially clearing me. Cassandra argued with them on the phone for 20 minutes, but they wouldn't budge. She hung up and looked at me with frustration in her eyes. I was stuck in legal limbo. Technically not charged with anything but not cleared either. I couldn't move forward with my life because this hung over everything. I couldn't apply for new jobs without explaining the situation. I couldn't make plans or feel safe because at any moment the DA could change their mind if they didn't find Brianna. Cassandra promised to keep fighting but warned me this could take months or even years if Brianna stayed hidden. I left her office feeling trapped in a nightmare that had no clear end. Gerard called me in for another meeting to explain what the FBI was doing to find Brianna. He spread out photos and documents on the table showing all her different appearances and identities. He explained she likely had multiple fake identities prepared and could be anywhere in the country by now. She'd been planning this for so long that she probably had backup plans for her backup plans. The FBI issued a federal warrant for her arrest under all known aliases and started circulating both her real dark-haired appearance and the blonde disguise she used with me. Gerard showed me the bulletins going out to law enforcement agencies across the country with her photos and descriptions. He warned me not to get my hopes up about a quick arrest. People like Brianna knew how to disappear and could stay hidden for years if they were careful. She had money, fake documents, and years of experience avoiding detection. The FBI would keep looking, but I needed to prepare myself for a long wait. I asked him what I was supposed to do with my life while she was out there, and he didn't have a good answer. Just wait, and hope they got lucky. 3 weeks crawled by with no news. I stayed at Katie's apartment most of the time because I couldn't stand being alone, Every day felt like waiting for something terrible to happen. Then Justin called Cassandra with a break in the case. He'd been monitoring credit card activity under all of Brianna's known fake names and got a hit. Someone used one of her cards at a hotel 4 states away 2 days earlier. Cassandra immediately contacted Gerard, and local police were sent to the hotel. By the time they arrived, Brianna had already checked out that morning. But the hotel had security footage, and it confirmed it was her. I watched the footage at the police station and barely recognized her. She was using dark hair again, cut short this time and wearing completely different clothing than anything I'd ever seen her wear. She looked like a different person, but Gerard said the facial recognition software matched her bone structure and confirmed it was the same woman. She'd stayed one night and paid cash, then disappeared before sunrise. The hotel clerk said she seemed quiet and kept to herself, didn't talk to anyone or cause any problems. She was a ghost moving through the world, leaving almost no trace except for that one credit card mistake. Gerard brought in FBI analysts to study her movement patterns and figure out where she might be heading. They mapped out her location starting from when she left my city, through the hotel sighting, and tried to predict her next move. The analysts determined she was heading west, possibly toward Mexico or Canada, where she could cross the border and disappear completely. Gerard coordinated with Border Patrol to flag all her known identities and photos. Officers at every crossing point got copies of her information with instructions to detain her immediately if she tried to cross. But Gerard warned me she likely had documents and identities they didn't know about yet. She'd been doing this for 7 years at minimum, and probably had passports and IDs stashed away under names that had never been connected to any investigation. The FBI would do everything they could, but there was a real chance she'd slip across the border before they caught her. I felt this crushing weight knowing she might escape, and I'd never get real closure or justice. That night, I completely fell apart at Katie's apartment. Everything hit me at once, and I couldn't hold it together anymore. This woman had spent an entire year pretending to care about me just to destroy my life. She'd listened to me talk about my problems and my dreams and my fears, and the whole time she was planning how to frame me for murder. Every coffee we shared, every movie we watched, every conversation we had was a lie. She'd hugged me and laughed with me and acted like my best friend while secretly collecting my DNA and stealing my belongings. I started crying and couldn't stop. Then the crying turned into angry screaming about how much I hated her and how violated I felt. Katie didn't try to calm me down or tell me it would be okay. She just held me while I cried and raged and let me process the betrayal without trying to fix it. She sat with me for hours while I went through every emotion possible, from grief to fury to fear to disgust. By the time I finally calmed down, it was after midnight, and I felt emptied out, but slightly better for having released some of the poison Brianna had left inside me. The next morning, Cassandra got a call from the DA's office while I was sitting in her waiting room. I could hear her voice through the door getting louder as she argued with whoever was on the phone. When she hung up, she called me into her office with a strange expression on her face. The DA's office was officially declining to file any charges against me based on the evidence of the frame-up. I felt this surge of relief, but Cassandra held up her hand before I could celebrate, and I would remain a person of interest until Brianna was actually caught, which meant I still couldn't fully move on with my life. It wasn't complete freedom, but it meant I couldn't be arrested while the manhunt for Brianna continued. The ankle monitor could come off and I could travel if I needed to, but the case would stay open and hanging over me until they found her. Cassandra explained this was the best we could hope for given the circumstances. The DA wasn't willing to fully clear me without Brianna in custody to confirm everything, but at least I wasn't facing imminent arrest anymore. I should have felt happy, but instead I just felt tired and frustrated that my life was still on hold because of what Brianna did. 2 days later, Justin made another discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about Brianna. He'd been investigating her movements before she left the city and found records of a storage unit rented under one of her fake names. Police got a warrant and raided the unit that afternoon. I wasn't there, but Gerard called me afterward to describe what they found. The unit was full of supplies for creating fake identities, including multiple wigs in different colors and styles, professional makeup for changing her appearance, and a printer for making fake IDs and documents. But the most disturbing discovery was a filing cabinet full of folders. Inside were detailed files on 4 other women besides me, each folder containing surveillance notes, photos, copies of documents, and plans similar to what Brianna had done to me. Gerard said it looked like I was just one target in a much larger operation. She'd been watching these other women and collecting information on them the same way she watched me. Some of the files went back 3 years, meaning she'd been planning multiple frame-ups or identity thefts for a long time. Gerard called me in to review the files and help identify any patterns that might lead to Brianna. I sat in the FBI office reading through folders on 4 women I'd never met, seeing my own nightmare reflected in their surveillance notes. Gerard confirmed I was part of something much bigger, and Brianna had likely been planning multiple crimes using different victims. The other women in the files were immediately contacted and warned about what had been found. 2 of them recognized Brianna from brief encounters where she'd tried to start friendships with them, using different fake names and appearances. One woman said Brianna had approached her at a gym 6 months ago and they'd met for coffee twice before the woman got busy and stopped responding to her messages. Another woman said Brianna had volunteered at the same community center and tried repeatedly to exchange phone numbers and make plans. Both women felt sick when they realized they'd narrowly avoided becoming her next victims. Gerard explained that finding these files was huge for the investigation because it proved a pattern, and might help predict what Brianna would do next. The next day, my nightmare became public knowledge. Somehow the media got hold of the story and my name was leaked as the woman who was nearly framed for murder by an elaborate con artist. I woke up to Katie shaking me and pointing at her phone where a news article described the whole case in detail. Within an hour, reporters were camping outside Katie's apartment building with cameras and microphones. My phone started exploding with calls and texts from news outlets requesting interviews. I had 17 missed calls before 9 in the morning. Cassandra called and told me to ignore every single request and not talk to anyone from the media. She said anything I said could be twisted or used against me later, and the best thing I could do was stay silent and let the investigation continue without interference. Katie closed all the curtains, and we sat in her darkened apartment while reporters knocked on the door and called our phones. I felt exposed and angry that my private trauma was now entertainment for strangers. People I'd never met were reading about the worst experience of my life, and probably judging me or speculating about whether I was really innocent. The whole thing made me feel dirty and violated all over again, like Brianna was still finding ways to hurt me even though she was hundreds of miles away. That night, I made the mistake of opening my laptop and searching my name. The first article had over 300 comments, and I started scrolling through them even though Katie told me not to. People were debating whether I was really innocent or if this was some elaborate defense strategy my lawyer cooked up. Someone wrote that the whole frame-up story sounded too convenient, and I probably killed the guy myself, then blamed my imaginary friend. Another person said I looked guilty in my driver's license photo that someone had posted. A third comment suggested I might be mentally ill, and actually believed Brianna existed, when really I had multiple personalities. I felt sick reading strangers pick apart my nightmare like it was entertainment. Someone started a poll asking if readers thought I was innocent or guilty, and 42% voted guilty. I slammed the laptop shut, but the damage was done. Katie found me sitting on her bathroom floor 20 minutes later just staring at the wall. She took my laptop and phone and hid them in her closet. Over the next few days, she screened every call that came through and managed my email account, deleting interview requests and blocking reporters who found my personal address. She made me breakfast every morning and sat with me while I tried to eat even though my appetite had disappeared completely. Katie became my connection to normal life, reminding me that real friendship existed even though Brianna had twisted it into something horrible. She never asked me to talk about my feelings or process what happened. She just stayed close and handled all the practical things I couldn't manage myself. 4 weeks after Brianna disappeared, Gerard called Katie's phone because mine was still hidden away. A motel clerk in Arizona had recognized Brianna from the FBI bulletin that showed both her real appearance and the blonde disguise. Local police surrounded the motel room within 30 minutes. They knocked and announced themselves but got no response. When they finally broke down the door, the bathroom window was open, and Brianna was gone. She left behind another fake ID with a different name and a bus ticket to California dated for that afternoon. Gerard sounded frustrated when Katie put him on speaker so I could hear. The near miss told him that Brianna was making mistakes now, getting sloppy under the pressure of being hunted. He explained that running this long takes resources and planning, and eventually people slip up when they run out of money or safe places to hide. He was increasing surveillance on border crossings and transportation hubs, putting her photo in front of every bus driver and ticket agent between Arizona and Mexico. Gerard believed she would surface again soon because her options were shrinking. 2 days later, Justin called with news that he had tracked down 2 of Brianna's previous victims from the files Gerard found. Both women agreed to speak with me over video call if it would help the investigation. Katie set up her laptop at the kitchen table, and I sat there waiting while Justin connected the call. The first woman appeared on screen and introduced herself as someone Brianna had befriended 3 years ago in Oregon, using the name Michelle Porter. She told me about 6 months of friendship that ended when Brianna disappeared with her credit cards, social security number, and enough personal information to open accounts in her name. The second woman joined the call and shared a similar story from 2 years ago in Washington state. Brianna had called herself Sarah Johns and worked alongside her at a nonprofit for 4 months, slowly collecting information and copies of documents. Hearing their stories helped me understand I was not alone in this nightmare, though neither of them had faced anything as serious as a murder frame-up. They both said they felt stupid for not seeing the manipulation sooner, and I told them I felt the same way about my entire year with Brianna. The first woman mentioned something that made Gerard sit forward when Justin told him about it later. She said the woman who befriended her had talked about growing up in foster care and being moved between homes as a kid. She also remembered Brianna being obsessed with true crime shows and podcasts, always talking about unsolved cases and how criminals got caught. It was impossible to know what was real about anything Brianna said, but Gerard added these details to her psychological profile anyway. Any information might help predict where she would go next, or how she would behave when cornered. The next week, Katie drove me to an appointment with a therapist who specialized in trauma from betrayal and manipulation. I sat in her office and tried to explain what it felt like to discover your best friend never existed. The therapist listened without interrupting, and then told me that my anger, fear, and feelings of violation were completely normal responses to what Brianna did. She explained that healing would take time and would not be linear. Some days would feel better and others would feel worse, and that was okay. I started seeing her twice a week and slowly began processing the nightmare without feeling like I was drowning in it. Detective Williams called 3 weeks after the Arizona incident to tell me something that made me cry for the first time in days. The victim's family had been fully informed about the frame-up, and they did not blame me for what happened. His sister even sent me a letter through the police department. I opened it with shaking hands and read her words apologizing for what I went through and expressing hope that Brianna would be caught, so both our families could have justice. She wrote that her brother had been trying to escape Brianna for over a year, and she wished he had gotten help sooner. The letter ended with her saying she was praying for me and hoped I could find peace eventually. So 5 weeks after the murder, I was sitting in Katie's living room when Gerard called her phone again. A woman matching Brianna's real appearance had been stopped by Border Patrol trying to cross into Mexico. Her documents flagged in the system as stolen, and when agents approached her, she tried to run. There was a tense standoff that lasted 40 minutes before FBI agents, including Gerard, arrived and took her into custody. Gerard's voice sounded different when he told me they had her, like he could finally breathe after weeks of chasing. I collapsed on Katie's couch with relief so intense my whole body shook. Katie grabbed me and held on while I cried harder than I had since this whole nightmare started. The constant fear that I might be convicted for a crime I did not commit finally released, and I could not stop shaking. Katie kept saying it was over. It was really over, and I just nodded because I could not form words yet. Katie kept her arms around me until the shaking stopped, and I wiped my face with my sleeve. Over the next week, the extradition process moved forward while I stayed at Katie's place because I still could not handle being alone. Gerard called with updates every other day about the paperwork and legal procedures required to bring Brianna back from the border detention facility where they were holding her. Detective Williams stopped by Katie's apartment to tell me the DA's office was preparing an official statement, clearing me of any connection to the murder. The statement went out on a Thursday morning, and my phone started ringing within minutes with calls from reporters and people I had not talked to in months. Katie answered each call and told them I was not giving interviews. Then she turned off my phone completely. The DA's statement said I had been the victim of an elaborate frame-up attempt and was no longer considered a suspect in any capacity. But reading those words on the official letterhead did not make me feel the way I thought it would. The vindication felt empty after weeks of living under suspicion and fear. Cassandra called that afternoon and asked if I wanted to attend Brianna's arraignment hearing the following Monday. I told her yes without thinking about it because I needed to see this woman in person one more time, needed to confirm that the nightmare was actually over. Katie drove me to the courthouse on Monday morning, and we met Cassandra outside the main entrance. She walked me through security and up to the courtroom on the 3rd floor where Brianna's case would be heard. We sat in the back row of the gallery, and I watched other cases get called while my hands shook in my lap. Then the bailiff announced her case number, and she walked into the courtroom through a side door. I barely recognized her at first because she looked completely different from the blonde woman I had known for a year. Her hair was dark brown and pulled back in a simple ponytail with no makeup on her face, and she wore an orange jumpsuit with handcuffs connecting to a chain around her waist. But when she moved and turned her head to scan the courtroom, I saw the same mannerisms I remembered from coffee shop meetings and hiking trips and late-night conversations that were all lies. She was a stranger wearing my former friend's body language, and the disconnect made my stomach hurt. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom while the judge was reading the charges against her. There was no recognition in her expression, no remorse or guilt or even acknowledgement that we had ever known each other. She looked at me with the same cold calculation I imagined she must have used when she looked at the victim before she killed him. Her face showed nothing but careful assessment, like she was studying a problem to solve rather than looking at a person whose life she had tried to destroy. I realized in that moment that she was completely unable to form real human connections, that everything about our friendship had been a performance she executed without ever feeling anything genuine. The judge asked her how she pleaded to the murder charge and the frame-up attempt, and her lawyer entered not guilty pleas on her behalf. Then the prosecutor stood up and argued against bail, explaining that she had fled across state lines and been caught trying to leave the country. The prosecutor listed her fake identities and the evidence of elaborate planning, and the judge listened without interrupting. When the prosecutor finished, Brianna's public defender tried to argue that she deserved bail because she had no prior criminal record under her current identity, but the judge cut him off. The judge denied bail based on flight risk and the seriousness of the charges, and I watched 2 officers lead Brianna toward the door in her handcuffs. She turned her head one more time before leaving the courtroom, and her eyes met mine again with that same empty calculation. I felt satisfaction watching her walk away in chains, but also a weird unease in my chest because I knew I would never really understand why she did this to me. Cassandra touched my arm, and we left the courtroom together. Gerard wanted to meet with me that afternoon to go over what they had learned from Brianna's arrest, so Katie drove me to the FBI field office downtown. Gerard brought me into a conference room with files spread across the table and told me to sit down. He explained that Brianna was refusing to cooperate with investigators or reveal her real name to anyone. They had run her fingerprints through every database available and found nothing. No criminal history or government records or any trace of who she actually was before she created the Brianna Hayes identity. Gerard said she was essentially a ghost, who had built herself specifically to prey on other people, and they might never discover her true identity or background. The FBI had searched all her belongings after the arrest and found detailed plans for at least 3 more frame-ups in different cities across the country. Each plan targeted a different woman and included surveillance notes, DNA collection strategies, and potential crimes to pin on them. Gerard opened one of the files and showed me pages of handwritten notes about a woman in Seattle, another woman in Denver, and a third woman in Austin. I was not special or uniquely targeted, just one victim in a pattern she had been following for years. Gerard told me I was lucky she had chosen murder this time instead of just identity theft, because otherwise she might never have been caught, and I would have just been another person she destroyed quietly. I stared at him, trying to process the idea that being framed for murder was somehow lucky, but I understood what he meant after a few seconds. The murder made it serious enough for a major investigation that uncovered her whole operation. If she had just stolen my identity or framed me for something smaller, I might have spent years dealing with the consequences while she moved on to her next victim. The other women whose files were found in her storage unit were being contacted and warned about what almost happened to them. Gerard said they were probably safe now because Brianna was in custody, but the FBI wanted them to know they had been targeted. I left the meeting feeling strange and disconnected, like I could not quite process everything I had just learned. Katie took me back to her apartment and made me eat dinner even though I was not hungry. The next day, I met with Cassandra at her office to discuss filing a civil lawsuit against Brianna for emotional distress, therapy costs, and the damage to my reputation from being publicly suspected of murder. Cassandra explained that actually collecting any money was extremely unlikely because Brianna had no traceable assets or property under any of her known identities. Everything she owned had been purchased with cash or prepaid cards that could not be traced back to any real accounts. But Cassandra said the legal action itself might feel good, might give me some sense of control over what happened. I agreed to file the lawsuit even knowing I would probably never see a cent, because she was right about it feeling powerful to take action instead of just being a victim. Over the next few weeks, Katie kept pushing me to think about moving to a new apartment because my current place was full of memories of Brianna's manipulation. Every room reminded me of times she had been there collecting my DNA or studying my routine or pretending to be my friend. I finally agreed one Saturday morning, and Katie helped me start packing up my life. We spent the whole weekend going through my belongings, and I threw away anything that reminded me of my fake friend. The coffee mugs she had used went in the trash. The books she had recommended went in a donation box. The photos of us together got deleted from my phone and computer. I was reclaiming my space and my life from someone who had tried to steal both. I found a new apartment across town that was smaller but felt clean and safe, and Katie offered to be my roommate so I would not have to live alone. 2 months after the police first knocked on my door, I sat in the same courthouse for Brianna's preliminary hearing, where the prosecutor would present evidence to determine if the case should go to trial. Katie and Cassandra came with me, and we sat in the gallery while the prosecutor laid out the entire year of planning, the murder, and the frame-up attempt. He showed the jury the notebook with detailed surveillance notes about my daily routine. He presented the box of collected items, including my hair and house key copies and old credit card. He walked through the timeline of how she had planted evidence at the crime scene using my belongings and DNA. He showed security footage of her entering my apartment building late at night and leaving hours later. The courtroom stayed completely silent except for a few gasps when the prosecutor showed photos of my scarf and coffee mug at the murder scene. He explained how she had pressed the knife into my hand while I was sleeping to get my fingerprints on the weapon, and how she had collected strands of my hair from my hairbrush over months to leave at the victim's apartment. The prosecutor presented phone records showing she had been in contact with the victim for over a year, despite the restraining order. And he showed the judge evidence that she had been planning to kill him and disappear under a new identity for at least 6 months. When he finished, the judge ruled there was more than enough evidence for the case to proceed to trial and set a trial date for 4 months away. The prosecutor called me 2 days after the hearing and asked me to come to her office to discuss my testimony. I sat across from her desk while she pulled out a thick folder with my name on it. She explained that the trial would likely last 2 weeks, and I would need to testify about how Brianna befriended me, collected my belongings and DNA, and planted evidence at the crime scene. She walked me through the types of questions the defense attorney would ask and warned me they would try to make it seem like I was somehow involved, or that our friendship was real, and I was lying now. I felt sick thinking about sitting in a courtroom while Brianna's lawyer tried to twist everything that happened. The prosecutor said she was confident about getting a conviction, because the notebook and physical evidence were overwhelming. But she warned me that trials can be unpredictable, and juries sometimes surprise everyone. She told me to prepare myself for a difficult experience, and suggested I work with a therapist to get ready for the emotional impact of testifying. I left her office feeling more anxious than before, because until that moment I had not fully understood what going to trial would actually mean. Gerard called me the next week and asked to meet at a coffee shop downtown. He told me the FBI was building a federal case against Brianna for identity fraud, interstate flight to avoid prosecution, and several other charges that could add decades to any state prison sentence. He explained that even if something went wrong at the murder trial, which he did not think would happen, she would still face serious federal prison time. I asked him how long she could get, and he said the federal charges alone could mean 20 to 30 years before any possibility of parole. This information helped me breathe a little easier, because I had been terrified that somehow she might get away with everything. Gerard also told me they had identified her as a suspect in 2 other unsolved cases from years ago in different states where women had been manipulated in similar ways. He said my willingness to testify and share everything I knew was helping them build cases that might bring justice for other victims too. I went back to work 3 weeks after the preliminary hearing because I could not sit at home thinking about the trial anymore. My boss had been understanding about everything and told me to take as much time as I needed, but I needed to feel normal again. Walking into the office felt strange because everyone knew what had happened. My colleagues were supportive, but I could tell they did not know what to say to me. Some people avoided eye contact, and others asked how I was doing in voices that were too careful and gentle. I focused on getting back into my routine and catching up on the projects I had missed. During lunch breaks, I noticed people would lower their voices when I walked into the break room, and I knew they were talking about me. I tried not to let it bother me, but I felt hyper-aware of everyone around me in ways I never had before. Every new person I met made me wonder what they wanted, and if they were being genuine. I hated that Brianna had done this to me, had made me suspicious and guarded when I used to be open and trusting. 3 months passed, and I fell into a new routine of work, therapy sessions, and spending time with Katie. The trial date was getting closer, and I was preparing myself mentally for having to face Brianna in court. Then Cassandra called me one morning and said Brianna's lawyer had approached the prosecutor about a plea deal. She explained that Brianna would plead guilty to murder and the frame-up attempt in exchange for life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This would spare everyone the trauma of a trial and guarantee she would be locked up for decades. The prosecutor wanted to know my opinion before making a decision. I told Cassandra I needed time to think about it. I spent the next 2 days struggling with what I wanted. Part of me wanted to face Brianna in court and hear her explain why she did this to me. I wanted to look her in the eye while the prosecutor presented all the evidence and forced her to confront what she had done. I wanted to testify and tell everyone how she had manipulated me for an entire year. But another part of me just wanted it to be over. I was exhausted from the constant anxiety and the waiting. I was tired of my life being on hold while the legal system moved forward. A trial would mean weeks of reliving everything, of having reporters write stories about me, of sitting in a courtroom while defense attorneys tried to make me look like a liar or an accomplice. I talked to Cassandra about the pros and cons. I talked to Katie, who said she would support whatever I decided. I talked to my therapist, who helped me work through my conflicting feelings. Finally, I called the prosecutor and told her I supported the plea deal. I said I wanted to move forward with my life, and this seemed like the best way to do that, while still making sure Brianna went to prison for what she did. The plea hearing was scheduled for the following week. I sat in the courtroom with Katie and Cassandra while Brianna was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. The judge asked her if she understood she was pleading guilty to murder and attempted frame-up. She said yes in a flat voice that showed no emotion. The judge asked if anyone had forced or coerced her into this plea. She said no. The prosecutor read a summary of the crimes, including the year of planning, the murder of her ex-boyfriend, and the systematic frame-up attempt against me. Brianna stood there with a blank expression, while the prosecutor described everything she had done. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she shook her head. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 30 years. As the bailiff led her away, she glanced in my direction, but her face showed nothing. No remorse, no anger, no recognition of me as a person she had tried to destroy. Gerard called me 2 days after the sentencing to tell me the FBI was closing their investigation now that Brianna had been convicted. He said they had identified her as a suspect in 2 other unsolved cases from years ago, where women had disappeared under suspicious circumstances. She would likely face additional charges for those crimes, but my part in this nightmare was officially over. He thanked me for my cooperation and said my willingness to share everything had helped them understand her patterns and methods. I thanked him for believing me when the evidence looked so bad and for working to find the truth. A victim impact statement hearing was scheduled before Brianna's sentencing was finalized. This was my chance to address her directly and tell her how her actions had affected my life. I wrote out what I wanted to say and practiced it with my therapist. When the day came, I stood in the courtroom and looked at Brianna sitting at the defense table. I told her that she had tried to destroy my life but failed. I explained that I was rebuilding myself and becoming stronger than I was before. I said that I hoped she would get the help she clearly needed during her decades in prison. I talked about the fear and violation I felt knowing she had been in my home while I slept, collecting evidence to frame me for murder. I described the terror of thinking I might be convicted for a crime I did not commit. I told her that what she did was evil and cruel, and I would never understand how someone could do that to another person. Brianna sat completely still during my entire statement. Her face showed no reaction to my words. She did not look sorry or angry or anything. She just stared at a spot on the wall behind the judge like I was not even speaking. When I finished and sat down, the judge asked if she had anything to say in response. She shook her head without looking at me. In that moment, I understood something I had been struggling with for months. I would never get real answers about why she chose me. I would never understand her motivations or hear an explanation that made sense. She was not going to suddenly break down and tell me the truth. Whatever was broken inside her that let her do these things was not something I could ever comprehend. I had to find peace with that ambiguity, and accept that some questions would never be answered. My healing could not depend on getting closure from her, because she was incapable of giving it. 6 months passed since that courtroom hearing, and I moved into a new apartment with Katie as my roommate. We spent the first weekend unpacking boxes and arranging furniture in ways that felt completely different from my old place. Katie hung photos of us on the living room wall and bought plants for the kitchen windowsill. I picked out a new couch that Brianna had never sat on and threw away the old coffee mugs that reminded me of her. Every morning, I woke up in a space that belonged only to me and Katie, free from the contamination of that year-long lie. My therapist helped me work through the hardest parts, teaching me how to trust people again without becoming paranoid. I started small by going to a book club Katie suggested, and talking to the other members about normal things like plot twists and favorite characters. Some days I caught myself analyzing everyone's motives and wondering if they were real, but I learned to recognize those thoughts and let them pass without taking over. Katie never pushed me to open up faster than I was ready, just stayed consistent and showed up every single time she said she would. We created routines together like cooking dinner on Wednesdays and watching movies on Friday nights, building a friendship that felt solid and genuine. I still have bad days where the betrayal hits me fresh and I question whether anyone is who they claim to be. Last Tuesday, I saw a blonde woman at the grocery store who looked like Brianna from behind, and my heart started racing until she turned around and was a complete stranger. Some mornings I wake up anxious and check the news to confirm Brianna is still in prison serving her life sentence. But therapy is helping me understand that healing is not linear, and setbacks do not erase progress. My life is not the same as it was before Brianna, and it never will be. But I am building something new that belongs to me and cannot be stolen. The woman who tried to frame me for murder is locked away for decades, and the legal system cleared my name completely. I am surrounded by people like Katie who prove every day that real friendship exists, and not everyone is pretending. I am genuinely okay now, maybe even stronger for having survived something that should have destroyed me, and I am ready to move forward into whatever comes next.